All right, everybody, it's just about 3:30. We'll give it another minute or so because I know we still have folks joining us on the webinar. My name is Eric Hayden. I'm a meteorologist with the Weather Service in Morehead City. Shane Kearns is joining us. He's going to talk about the coastal flood threat. I know a lot of the focus has been on the severe weather potential, and rightly so. This is not something that we see every year in terms of risk level, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But we don't want to forget about that we have coastal factors as well with wind, gusty winds and coastal flooding. So we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. If you hear me, you should be good on your end for audio. We're going to have a chance to ask questions at the end. We'll give you the ability to ask questions at any point. Shane and I can read in the chat what you're asking, and then we can also take your verbal questions. We can unmute your line and you'll be good to go. Looks like we have most folks on the webinar already. So I think we will get started. So again, this webinar is for the severe weather potential here tomorrow, especially later tomorrow and tomorrow night. Shane did an awesome job. He just made this briefing. All of you should have this in your email inbox so you can follow along as well as we go through these slides. I want to take a step back and talk briefly about some technical information. Again, you can watch this on your mobile device, your personal computer. If you're on a mobile device like this, if you swipe left or right, you can actually see the whole presentation full screen. And again, you're going to have the ability to ask questions. Just type it into the chat itself. Shane and I will get to it at the end. If you want to ask a verbal question, just raise your hand. We'll see that your hand is raised, and then we'll acknowledge you at the very end. Before we say anything on this webinar, there's a couple points we really want to hammer home. Number one, we want folks to have multiple ways to get warnings. Luckily, most of this should move through when we're awake, but as we get later in the event tomorrow night, some folks may be going to bed. So please help us stress this message. Multiple ways getting warnings, at least one that will wake you up. It would be great if they have a NOAA weather radio. We always talk about those. Do what I just did, make sure it has batteries in it and we're good to go. A cell phone app is good. Any of our private sector friends or TV, that's fine. Make sure it's on. Make sure that the notifications are not turned off. It's real important stuff, especially as we get into tomorrow night. The second thing we want to hammer home, know where to shelter. Nowhere is not a good place to shelter, and that would be mobile homes. So I know we have a lot of folks in mobile homes across Eastern North Carolina. We want those folks to be thinking about where they need to go tonight, not waiting until tomorrow when we have any possible warnings, knowing their neighbors, being able to go to a more substantial shelter. All of this information is on our website, weather.gov/moreheadcity/tornadoes. We have a whole preparedness page there for you. So that's all for you to see and share with everybody in the community. As far as the greatest impacts, our biggest concern is strong winds, the potential for tornadoes, some of which could be strong, and large hail. Shane's going to talk about the coastal flooding threat because, again, that is a concern, especially as we start to pick up some wind speeds across our area. This is a severe weather map from the Storm Prediction Center out in Oklahoma. A moderate risk for severe weather across a good chunk of our area, especially Greenville and Cape Lookout south and west. I want to give you some perspective on this. This is a multi-level map. It's a 4 out of 5 on the concern level for severe weather. So that's the first thing. Number two, we're pretty sure about these stats, but it's roughly every 10 or 11 years since the last time we had something like this, 2011, 2012. So this is not a once every year thing. This is a once every 10-year type of thing in terms of concern for a day 2 outlook to have moderate risk for Eastern North Carolina. In the past, we've had many tornadoes on a moderate risk day. In the past, we've had a moderate risk day with only 1 tornado. Let's hope it's none this time around. So still some uncertainty exactly what happens, but I do want you to remember that it is a level 4 out of 5 for this whole area shaded in red. So something that we don't see every year. Biggest concern, possibility of tornadoes. Some could be strong, large hail, and then damaging winds, causing issues with trees and power outages. Shane made this awesome map from our forecasters at Morehead City. Not to put it all on Shane, we all put this together. You all ask about timing. Roughly 2 to 8 o'clock across the western part of our area. This is specifically with a strong line of thunderstorms with the potential for damaging winds and strong tornadoes. There could be some isolated storms out ahead of it. Those are always tricky to time, but this is when we think that line will come through, the thing that we'll be watching on radar tomorrow. So again, 2 to 8 o'clock, the western part of our area, 4 to 11, the central part of our area, roughly along Highway 17, and then after 6 o'clock toward the coast. Use this timing as a rough estimate. Hey, it's evening and tomorrow night. That's what we're trying to convey. No, it may wiggle a little bit left or right depending on how quickly these storms get in. You'll be hearing about it on the news tonight. This is the same system that's producing some very, very bad weather across the deep south. So again, this is the same system. We need to certainly take this serious. A level 4 out of 5 on our map for severe weather. I'm going to turn it over to Shane now. It's not all about the severe weather. It's also about the wind and coastal flooding, and he's going to take you home with that. Don't forget, if you're just joining us, ask questions in the chat. Be ready to raise your hand, and we'll take verbal questions from you at the end of the webinar. So Shane, you can take it away.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So in addition to the severe threat, we're tracking a cold front that's going to move south behind this severe weather tomorrow. So this is going to take place Friday, and there's going to be more of a stagnant weather pattern. So once this front comes through, we're looking at northerly winds, pretty strong, going to be sustained for could be a couple days into early next week. It looks like the strongest winds, what we have in the graphic there, is going to come over the weekend, but we're still tracking more of a longer fetch of stronger winds into early next week as well. And there is a potential for some wind advisories to be issued out on the Outer Banks, but at this point, there's still a little bit too much uncertainty and too far out in time to issue that out right now. So next slide. So when we have stronger winds, we're also worried about coastal flooding. And this is going to kind of be in two separate categories. First, I'll start with the greatest risk. We're looking at sound side flooding, and that's going to be more or less south of Cape Hatteras, across Hatteras Island into Ocracoke Island, and then down East Carteret, and potentially up the Neuse River, so southern Craven County, and even up getting closer to New Bern, possibly with this strong fetch of northeast winds. So we're potentially looking at least a couple foot rises above ground level at this point. Can't really get too much in the specifics, but it does look like a fairly long duration, minor to moderate flooding event on the sound side. Ocean side, we're looking at, and this is always the question, there's going to be strong onshore flow for several days, large waves out there. There's going to be at least a potential for some ocean overwash along Highway 12, the standard weak spots on the northern Outer Banks going down towards Rodanthe and also near Oregon Inlet, probably most susceptible to getting some kind of ocean overwash. So we're going to continue to track that. It's going to depend on exactly how high the waves are, how high our water levels get. So it's a few different things that have to kind of come into focus for ocean side impacts, but we're definitely monitoring that potential. So finally, we have our total water level forecast. This is for duck. So as you can see, we're not looking at impacts on the coastal flooding side for a few high tides. So not until we get to the end of our forecast are we seeing water levels rise close to minor or possibly moderate flood stage. And that's not going to be until Friday night into Saturday morning. So that's just our quick first look to give you a picture of what it could look like. That's obviously subject to change as we get better data coming into the forecast models the next couple of days. So finally, to kind of wrap everything up, a two-tiered outlook here. So on the forefront, we have severe weather possible tomorrow into tomorrow evening or early tomorrow night. The worst of the storms are going to be along the line, possibly coming into the eastern North Carolina from late or mid-afternoon through the evening hours. There could be strong damaging wind gusts, potential for hail 1 inch or greater, and tornadoes as well in supercell thunderstorms. There could be a few tornadoes that are strong, and we're going to see some minor to moderate coastal flooding as well on the second tier of this from Friday going into the weekend. And there could potentially be wind gusts 40 to 50 miles an hour and wind advisories possible over the Outer Banks. So our next briefing is going to be by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, and it'll likely be our final briefing for the severe weather threat. And depending on how it evolves on the coastal flooding side, we may continue briefings going through the day tomorrow. So passing back to Eric, and we'll talk about questions.